Hey folks, today we finally set up this cute little nano tank that I got at the Customer Appreciation Day sale last year. It's coming up right after this. Spoilers. Hey YouTube, this is Pecktec, and as you might remember a while back, I picked up this little 4-gallon nano tank, and I thought it was really interesting, really caught my eyes. Kind of a different shape than like a lot of the specs and stuff that I've put together. But it had the same kind of principle, that built-in filter in the back. Now the back of this tank is a little bit different. It's just the way it's baffled than like say a fluval spec or one of those types of nano tanks with the built-in filter, which is basically just a panel with a couple of areas. An area for your pump, and then an area for some mechanical and biological, sometimes chemical filtration. This has a baffled area, which kind of leaves this one zone in the back that's sort of, it's empty. Now I could fill that full of mechanical and fill the middle one full of biological, and then of course just put the pump and maybe a heater in the last chamber there, but it just seems like overkill. Like that would be a lot, that would be a whole lot of biological filtration in there, which, you know, it wouldn't be bad, but it's just a 4-gallon tank. It's actually pretty small. So I'm going to think of some creative ways to use that first chamber. What's nice though is it will keep even a shrimp or something crawl back into that last chamber. It's baffled out again so that I can make sure that nothing crawls up under the filter. That's something that can happen with the specs. If you look, I think it says even as a safety feature, but all the way across the bottom, if something got in there and it can crawl all the way under the filter over to the pump and like get in that pump area where, you know, it would be really difficult to fish them out if you needed to. So this kind of has a prevention, you know, to keep it from doing that. It's got a little piece of glass, so the water's got to go under that glass and then back up and then back down into the next chamber, which makes it really easy to mechanically filter your biological media too. It makes that a little bit cleaner. So I thought that was really interesting, but I was a little bit perplexed as to what to do with the last chamber. But I guess that comes down to what I eventually put in it, and we'll discuss that a little bit at the end. The setup for this tank is pretty simple. It kind of stole the spot from the aquaponics tank. That's a tank I took down and I cleaned to try and do it again at some point because I really didn't have time to mess with it. It wasn't actually doing too bad, and I was surprised at the anubias in there. It's continued to grow, albeit really slowly, of course. And they didn't get all algified or anything, so I took those out and I included them here. What was really cool about the setup for this tank is I already had all the supplies. They're basically the leftovers that I had from the spec 16-gallon. In fact, there was probably a little bit more than enough because I overdid it a bit, I think, with the substrate in here. It's probably a little bit higher than it needs to be. supposedly all those powders and stuff, it was appropriate for a 20-gallon tank, and I was setting up a 16-gallon tank. So I was like, oh, if I just save a little bit left, then I could, maybe use this stuff and set up a really nice, nicely substrated, smaller tank. And that's what I did. It was pretty cool. I didn't have much left of any of that stuff, and I'm not sure to what degree it helps, but all I can say is my spec, especially since I rescaped it, I kind of moved some things around to the giant rock out, and I rescaped it. Since then, it's been absolutely gorgeous. Right now, it is my favorite tank. It is growing plants like crazy. And I'm really glad, because it's a neat setup, and it's really easy to maintain. Just because of the way the space is in my home, because I've got aquariums everywhere, it's actually on kind of a high shelf, and I can look right directly in it, and I like that too, because I can see it a little bit better than I can see my other tanks that are usually a little bit lower than sight level, unless I'm sitting down. So I can stand in the kitchen and look at it, and I like it a lot. Now, I pulled the anubias out of the old tank that was here, but the rest of it is mostly buce, and I got all of that at the Big Fish deal. If you guys saw my last Aqua Shopper video, basically I shot that video, and then I set up this tank right after it. Like, I literally, boom, boom, I did one, then the other. So this tank has actually been set up for several weeks. It never went through a cloudy stage. I haven't seen any of the like brown diatom algae like I usually see, or really any other kind of algae. It's been pretty calm. Now, when I initially set it up, I had a little bit different light on there, and that light actually sat on it for a couple of weeks. I decided to switch over to this one. One of my favorite modifications that I made for the Fluval Flex was adding a pendant light to it and then the glass top. I decided to do the same thing on here. For the pendant light, I used an Ashta 20. Basically, you've got this, and I think a 130 or an 80 or something like that, a much bigger version. This is a pretty bright light. It comes with a dimmer switch, so you can kind of adjust it, and that's super rare for a lot of these LED lights. But I turned the dimmer switch down just a little bit because it seemed like it was pretty bright, like right from the get-go. I actually opened this on one of my shopping videos a while back, and I was glad to finally get to use it. I've been kind of saving it for a really classy looking nano tank, and I really love the way it looks on here. It's a well-built light. At least that's my impression after 1 week of using it. We'll see how it goes after that. The other thing I added into the bottom, and it's real subtle right now because I didn't have a lot of good samples of it, was four-leaf clover, which once it starts to grow into water is like a one-leaf clover. That's a carpeting plant that I've actually struggled with a little bit, and the one time I did get it to grow pretty well was into the woods tank. Unfortunately, I kind of hedged my bets with it, and I put the four-leaf clover on one side, and I put Monte Carlo on the other side, and the Monte Carlo just like went over it like a steamroller. And eventually the four-leaf clover just kind of melted away. It would not compete with the Monte Carlo, which made a carpet that's pretty thick. So I've spread some around in here. Anything that loves good substrate is going to probably do pretty well in here. And that's a lot of different plants. This particular type of buce I got, it's got a nice root system, so I'm hoping that just kind of implanting that root system. I left most of the rhizome. I didn't put it deep into the substrate. I left a lot of it out. I've actually had really terrible luck with buce. I'm the first to admit it. I can keep it alive, but it doesn't seem to grow for me. So I definitely wanted to get a tank that was mostly buce. I ended up putting this Anubis Nana. This might actually be Nubis Nana Bonsai because it's the smallest, or maybe it's just Nana Petite, but it's the smallest leaf structure in an Anubis that I've seen. But it was so nice I had to include it too, and it kind of breaks up, because really this is just one type of plant, I think. It kind of breaks up those leaves. And the four-leaf clover across the bottom, that'll give a different sort of leaf type. And I've still got some little nooks and crannies here where, as I find little failed buce projects from around my other aquariums, I can maybe add them in here and see if they do any better. I have no plans for CO2 on this tank. I'm not doing any on the tank downstairs, the 16-gallon, and it's doing great. I don't seem to need to do anything. I'm not even really dosing it. I didn't add any fertilizer or anything. Once I got that stuff kind of replanted and everything reset, it just started growing, and it was terrific. I actually just went through a huge trim in there where I pulled out a bunch of plants. But that'll be for another video. I guess the inevitable question is always, what am I going to put in this? And you know, it's a 4-gallon tank. There's not a lot of stuff I can put. And on top of it being a 4-gallon tank, I filled most of it up with plants and rocks and dirt and that sort of thing. I'm pretty sure I could probably raise a betta in here and it would be all right. I think it would do okay. But that's not really a lot of space. It's got a pretty good flow of water in there. I've got a little fluval spec pump in there pumping the water. One thing this didn't come with was any sort of pump in the back. It came with a little connector hose to connect between the two panels, but there's no hose attached to that, so it was just a little plastic piece. So I constructed the filter area kind of myself. I mean, it had the little panels, but you know, I put in some foam that I had. I think that was aqua clear foam, like from one of the aqua clear filters that I have. And I used Biohome Ultimate for some biological media in there, because I had a bunch of that too. Except for the buce plants that I bought specifically to put in here, this is pretty much all made out of leftovers and stuff I had sitting around. And I gotta say, it looks much better on my shelf than it did on my shelf. So it did cut a glass panel for the top of this, and it did not go well. I'm gonna have to just try again. Even though I bought a little glass cutter thing, but it was literally my first time trying to cut glass like that. You gotta score it really well once, and then you apply pressure, you know, in a corner, or you put a dowel rod down. I've seen a couple of different ways to do it. Take a corner of a table and some gloves, and you break it. And if you score it really well, you get a nice clean break. I didn't score it really well. I think I did a really poor job of scoring it. And I ended up with a hideous like curve. But it still actually serves its purpose on here. It completely covers the front. I got a little partial coverage in the back. I'm definitely going to have to be careful not to cut my hand while I'm doing water changes or anything like that. But it will help me keep up with the evaporation in here. I love the glass lids. The glass lid that I put on my Fluval Flex is probably my favorite mod, especially with the pendant light. It's a really nice view for one. On the Fluval Flex, you have this black plastic top, whereas now I can look directly down into the top of it, and although there's a lot of condensation and stuff like that, it feels like you've got more view than you did before. It's a lot brighter in there. I feel like I'm getting my light dispersed better across the tank, especially from the pendant light, because I can elevate it a bit and kind of spread the light out. It gives you a little bit more control too over how much the intensity is. That plus things like to jump out, and that really bugs me. So having a lid is always the best option in my opinion. Some folks say it takes a little bit away from the aesthetics. I don't know. I kind of disagree with that. It is important to not do what I did and put it like a broken piece of glass on top of your aquarium. So get a nicer piece cut or be better at it than I am. I'll eventually fix this. All right, and that's all I got for you this week. Next week, I believe I'm going over to our friend's house, or I've already gone over there. We'll have to go back over there and kind of see how it does. But I'll be going over to a friend's house to help them set up a tank. They've taken one down and they want to set it back up the right way. So I'm going to go over there and plant it up for them. And I've got yet another aquascape to do. And that one's going to be extremely different, hopefully. We'll see. Until next time, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. If you guys remember, if you guys saw, so I put the filter to, the filter in this one, now of course this tank did not come with, and it's really interesting.